From city streets to online spaces, no question, racism is intensifying across North America, challenging the very narrative that society is becoming more inclusive. Hello, everybody. I'm Mohini Singh. Welcome to Chai and Chat with Mohini. Today, we'll do a deep dive into why racism globally is on the rise and how it affects individuals, families, and the community. Joining us for an open, honest, clear, heartfelt discussion, we have Azaria Anderson, who moved to Canada from Jamaica in 2019, and Dr. Shirley Chow, Associate Professor of Social Work at UBCO. Welcome, but first, before we start our chat, how about some chai? It comes to us from Samosa Place on Springfield Road in Kelowna. Let me start with you, Azaria. You have been here since 2019.
Yes.
You shared some incidents that occurred with you. Can you tell us about that and how did that make you feel?
Well, coming from Jamaica, as an immigrant, as a young person, as a woman, there's a lot of conflicting feelings, like all mixed up in one. And then sometimes they come to a head. For example, I'm walking down the street, on Ellis Street, and this isn't like an ancient story. This is just last year. I'm walking down the street, middle of the day, everything is going good, or so I think. And then an individual on a bike, like a bicycle, just spits at me and my friend. And it was so shocking that when it happened, my friend's first instinct was not even to look in the direction of where she knew it was coming from. It was to look up because, oh, maybe it's raining. Because your mind just goes, oh, it has to be anything but that, you know? It's just such a shock. And then I can remember another incident. I'm walking down Bernard, again, all in the like kind of common area where you should feel safe to like go shopping and things like that. I'm walking down Bernard and somebody walks past me and says the N word to my face. And so again, you go into this shock. You're like, I can't have heard that. So then I turned around to look at him and he said, yeah, I said it. And then in that moment, the loneliness that you feel can't even be described. It can't be explained because who do you turn to, number one, when you're the minority, you know? And then number two, it's like, did I do something? And then it even sucks that you even have to start questioning yourself like that.
You know, left you in a very vulnerable place, didn't it? Yeah. And and did you want to turn around and say something to him or
You know, you always think if this happens to me, like you watch the videos on TikTok and you're like, oh, if this happens to me, I would do this. But I think the reality is in the situation and in the moment, your brain kind of freezes because nobody wants to walk around and on. You know, you don't want to walk around thinking, I'm going to do this if this happens, because you want to assume that you're living a safe society. So when it happens, you feel shocked, you feel vulnerable. But in my case, at least, my first thing isn't to turn around and tell him off. My first thing is, why would you do that? It's just to go straight into questioning.
and did you question and then you question yourself,
You
did I do something
you
wrong?
question, did I do something wrong? Did other people hear that? Why did nobody say anything? Maybe I didn't hear it. You just start thinking all these things.
So, Azaria, in the time that you've been here, now that it would have been what? It's been 7 years.
Five-ish, yeah, six, seven, yeah.
Yeah, 6, 7 years, yeah. Have you seen a rise in, you know, racist act,
Oh,
racism being trans?
110%. And it's happening all over. It's not just local to Kelowna. I remember coming on a bus from Vancouver. My friend's visiting Canada from Jamaica. So excited. We're on a bus, and a woman of color comes in. She sits down, and the person that she was sitting with gets up and moves. And then my friend looks at me like, because what? You know what I mean? And so that just, it's not just, oh, in the downtown area, it's across Canada.
And this is all you've seen a change in the recent past few years.
Yeah.
So my question to you, Dr. Chow, is why? Why has there been this vibe that has just increased and it's such a negative vibe? I've got to tell you, I came in 89 with an old car and an old bicycle to Kelowna, and there weren't that many people of color here, but I was embraced and taken in, and I was working in television in those days. So I call it my professional privilege. I have never actually faced overt racism, for which I'm very grateful, but I'm conscious that it does exist because the vibe, I'm told the vibe has totally changed. Your response to that?
Well, thank you. It's been around for a long time.
So, what you're saying, it's been there, the band aid's just been ripped off.
Well, I think it's always been there, and I'm not saying this out of a subjective space. As a racialized woman, grew up in Canada as well. It's a historical fact that this is the case. That racism has always been part of Canada's history, and also what's happening now. Now, what we're seeing though, in the increase in race-based or racially motivated hate, the kind of incidents you're talking about, Azaria, those are actually happening, and they're happening because we've seen over the last couple of years a severe slippage away from this. I guess you could say, where people were really coming to an understanding about equity and inclusion and diversity and what it means to be in solidarity together. And I think there is a small group of people with loud voices who don't want that to continue. And why is that? There's a threat. And there's a perceived threat that's based on ideologies that really don't make sense when you really unpack it. But the idea is that certain people belong on certain lands.
Is it also economic threat? It's um, the fear of being challenged socially and economically if the dominant culture sees a rise in people of different backgrounds in terms of numbers.
That could be a part of it. I think there's several ways to address that. On the one hand, like you were talking about when you arrived here, back in that at that time, there was a small community. You were perhaps a minority of a minority at that
Correct.
time. And there is a theory out there that when people see others that are different from them, but they're in small numbers, they're not seen as a threat. In fact, you become exoticized, you become somebody that they want to befriend. The difference is seen as not a threat. The difference meaning your skin tone, your accent, all of these things. You become something that is novelty in some ways. I hate to say that, but that's how it's kind of experienced sometimes. And so when you're new into the space, people will go, oh, okay, they're not a threat. But when there's more or perception of there's more people like yourself and others who look different from the locals, then it starts to become, people start to make this connection somewhere along the way that they think they're being threatened, that they're being invaded. And this kind of rhetoric has been in place for a long time. It has justified many, many acts of racism.
But why is it so open now? Before jokes were whispered, maybe said between friends. Now it's open conversation. Nobody cares.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, saying something, it's become, it sort of feels like it's becoming the new normal.
Yeah, absolutely true. And if we look at what's happened in the last 2, 3 years, racist comments, racist acts, hostility, even during the COVID period, we saw that happen with anti-Asian racism.
Yes.
So there has been a permission by people in power and systems in power to say it is okay to do this and you will suffer no consequences for this. And people pick that up.
Thank you for addressing that because I was going to ask you how much does it have to do with the change in leadership in the US and the comments that come out from the highest office towards immigrants, towards racialized people, and the activities you see, in the in south of the border, has that permeated into our culture and the rest of the world?
I think that's an excellent question. I think Prime Minister Carney's recent comment, at the World Economic Forum and at Davos, he's called the community, global community, to stand up against bullying behaviors, against attitudes that promote practices of hate, practices of discrimination. And for the highest leader at the highest level of our country to do that, I think it tells us, all of us, that he's also trying to lead to show that we need to do something. And he's asking all other leaders to stand up against this kind of behavior because it is hurting people. It's a public health problem now.
It's a mental health problem.
Yes.
You know, during COVID, you made reference to COVID. There was an incident where a protester verbally assaulted a security guard. Man was charged but not convicted. And one could attribute that to being COVID tension and so on and so forth. But it didn't stop there. It happened all over again a couple of weeks ago. Young teens, 12 to 14-year-olds, verbally assaulted a Sikh security guard, telling him to go back home, calling him names because he was wearing a turban, and that's 12 years old. You know, I couldn't tie my shoelaces and have my breakfast and get my clothes on and get out the door at 12. How do they come up with something like that? It's become socially acceptable.
Yeah. And I think we as a society, here's the interesting thing. You know, you asked the question about economic threat or economic, competition. If people are really educated about the state of Canada and how Canada has come to be what it is, they would know and understand that immigration has always been part of that. It is because there's a reliance on the labor of immigrants and their contributions are beyond labor. We know this. This is why Canada has been so prosperous. The fact that there are many people who don't know this and think it's okay to attack people of color and indigenous peoples, that tells us how there's a severe lack of undereducation. Either that or there's just willful ignorance to want to continue to execute such poor behaviors and to let their children continue to be this way. So I find it very interesting that we have this situation in Canada, and particularly here in Kelowna, where we have, a very bountiful and abundant community of minds, of great people, and welcoming people. So when we have people like this who, including teenagers, who are doing this, who they really actually pull the community down.
Not just the community, it sends a shockwaves,
Yeah.
and then there's copycats,
Yeah.
and then communities that are targeted question their own faith, their belief, who they are, and then want to change. Um, it just is not. It just is not the right feeling for the progress of our community. But I have to ask you another question, just playing devil's advocate here. As an immigrant, I came in '83. As an immigrant, and you came in 2019. As an immigrant, do we not bear the responsibility to assimilate within the community we have chosen to live in, and be part of the larger community? And do we not carry the weight on our shoulders to educate people around us? Your thoughts on that?
Do you want to?
Do you want to take
I don't want to
that?
talk too much, but I'm happy to,
Zara?
and I'm happy to follow up.
I think assimilation is a responsibility, but I also don't think it has to come at the price of erasure. And I think there needs to be space intentionally made by the majority who are asking the minority and who are presenting pathways for the minority to join the society. There needs to be space made for the minority to embrace and share culture. I think the relationships need to be reciprocal. It's something that has been taught in Indigenous practice of having that reciprocal relationship where we share. And I think both things can exist side by side. I can come and I can learn English, Canadian English, how to speak to you so we can, interact. But I also think it is important for you to know that, you can't touch my hair just because I moved here. that doesn't give you the right to erase my culture.
Well said. Thank you for that. You know, I remember when I was in the newsroom, this is funny. People from India nod when they talk. Yes is yes. No is no. No, you nod your head. My news director used to, my assignment editor used to always get annoyed with me because he'd say, "Did you get the story?" He'd say, "What? Yes or no?" I'd say, "No." I said, "I missed it." And he said, "But that sounded like yes." So I didn't realize till much later that these were my nuances that he would get irritated with me about. And I explained to him that I was nodding my head saying yes. He says, "Well, it looks like the way you nod your head when you say no." So I thought, while it's funny, I had to educate him, and then I had to learn to actually verbalize my response. And so I use that as a silly little example, but it's an example of how it's a little bit incumbent on us too to educate people, but they have to be willing to listen.
Well, I would expand on that in terms of, is it an assimilation that's required? Is it acculturation that's required? Assimilation is the complete absorption, right, of someone, so that
Yeah.
when you come to a place that you completely turn to be like locals. Well, that's all fine and good, assuming that the local environment allows for it. And so when we have racist, attacks, we have these aggressions towards people, these hostilities, it's pretty hard for people to assimilate. When we talk about acculturation, we're talking about people maintaining their cultural practices, their cultural beliefs, and still be, but highly engaging though with the local community and the culture. But I'm going to also push the fact that people are able to enter into Canada means that they've already passed. They've passed the test. They've passed the test of being a good human being to be here.
And you know what, Dr. Chow, I do want to point out that the rise of racist activity is not just a North American thing. It happened in New Zealand, which was horrendous,
Yep.
when you saw a group of young men, young, strong men doing the haka dance, the Maori dance, in to block a Sikh parade, a peaceful religious parade, which is so welcome in Kelowna. That was horrible, and it actually sent shockwaves around the world.
Yeah.
And and why? Nobody knows why. So, do you, Azaria, when you walk down the street at night, do you walk looking over your shoulder? Is it just because you're alone in the dark, or is it because you're a
Because
dark
you're,
woman?
I will say, even if it's not physically looking over my shoulder, I have grown to be a lot more apprehensive and reserved when it comes to social interactions and when it comes to sharing parts of myself, because you enter every space hoping, yes, that your opinions, your culture, you as a whole human being will be welcomed, but you also learn that that is unfortunately not the reality. So I have learned to be a lot more apprehensive about how I enter spaces and how I present myself.
When will this all end, and how will this all end? Do you think? Who takes the lead on this? Our prime minister has been very clear. That's our country. But what about the rest of the world?
Well, I think it's something that we're seeing in terms of solidarity across the world. We don't see enough in the news about all the people that have been out there protesting in solidarity against these kind of acts. In the UK, they had that recently in September when 110,000 people came out in support of Reform UK, in support of anti-immigration. And there was a group of people who also came out in opposition to that, and it's important to see that as well. We're seeing this also in the United States, where there's thousands and thousands of people who are saying, no, we will not stand by and be witnessing accounts of, people being harmed. This is not us. So I think there's more of that than we think. We're just not seeing. So media has a huge role to play to give more fair exposure to what is being said out there, what the messaging is, what's happening to people. I think it shouldn't end in such a way that people are hurt everywhere. What we're doing now is what we're seeing as a legacy of harms and the rippling impacts of that psychologically, emotionally, mentally to people who are exposed to this kind of violence, not only in person, but also by what we see.
As well, our elected officials at every level have a strong role to play
Yeah.
to send out that message of cohesion, inclusivity, and collective growth.
I also just want to add, I think, just thinking back to that conversation of assimilation, I think that's why education is so important because as someone who's been living here thinking, I have to assimilate, I didn't even know that there was another form called acculturation where I could maintain and like preserve who I am and the culture that I came from. And so I feel like even yes, the majority needs to be educated, but I think even within our own circles we need to provide that space for us to learn about what options we have, what are our rights. When somebody says something mean to you, where do you go? What can you do? And that so that you don't have that feeling of loneliness that you feel when these incidents can occur.
Thank you so much for being so brave, for being so bold, and for being so honest and being here. This is a really important discussion. Racism may be rising, but so is the determination to challenge it. Every voice, every story, like Azaria's, every listener helps push the world in a better direction, just as you said, Dr. Chow. Thanks for being part of this conversation. Please stay aware, stay brave, and keep believing that together we can make a difference. From all of us here at Chai and Chat, bye bye.